Blackwood Hall sat on a cliff like a bad memory that refused to wash away. Rain stitched the sky into a single gray sheet, and the wind slammed the tall windows as if the ocean itself wanted inside. Genevieve Miller stepped through the servant entrance with a suitcase that looked too light for a whole life. Shoulders straight, chin lifted, and eyes that held the quiet focus of someone who had been humiliated before and learned not to crumble. The housekeeper barely looked at her, only barked rules like they were chains. Never enter the West Wing, never ask questions, never be upstairs after sunset. The other staff watched from the hallway with that nervous half-smile people wear when they want to feel safe by making someone else smaller. Genevieve didn't argue, but she felt the sting anyway. She'd been called nothing in foster homes, laughed at in clinics, and blamed for helping the wrong people. When she'd lost her nursing license for treating patients the system didn't want, she'd learned what justice meant in the real world. It often arrived late, if at all. So she took the uniform, tied her hair back, and did what she always did, worked twice as hard, spoke half as much, and held her kindness like a blade she refused to drop. That night, the butler, Reynolds, guided her into a library that smelled of old leather and cold stone. A man stood by the window, back turned, watching the storm with the stillness of a statue. "Mr. Croft," Reynolds said softly, like a warning. Sebastian Croft didn't move at first. Then he turned, and Genevieve felt the room change as if oxygen had been removed and replaced with ice. He was breathtaking in a cruel way, sharp cheekbones, midnight hair, eyes like shattered winter. Not handsome like a movie star, but like a storm you can't outrun. People said vampires looked human. He looked like a reason humans invented prayer. He studied her without blinking. Genevieve sensed the staff holding their breath, waiting for her to tremble, to drop her gaze, to prove she belonged in fear. But fear was a luxury for people whose lives were soft. "Are you afraid of the storm?" Sebastian asked, voice calm, testing. Genevieve set the tray down with steady hands. "Thunder is just noise," she said. "It only hurts you if you let it." His eyes narrowed, not because she was rude, but because she was not performing weakness for him. "And what can hurt me?" he asked, as if he wanted her to say, "Nothing," as if he wanted to hear his own power echoed back. Genevieve paused, a flicker of old sadness crossing her face before she caught it. "Time," she answered. "Time hurts everyone." She didn't know why she said it. Maybe because she could see something behind his coldness, a hidden exhaustion that didn't match his perfect posture. Maybe because she recognized the look of someone who had survived too long. Later, in the servant quarters, the other maids whispered that she was stupid for speaking at all. One sneered that she'd be fired by morning. Another muttered that Croft liked to collect girls who didn't know their place. Genevieve kept her head down, but her stomach tightened. Social justice wasn't a slogan inside mansions like this. It was whether someone with power chose to crush you for entertainment. She wondered which kind of monster Sebastian Croft was, the obvious kind or the polite kind. Across the house, Sebastian made his decision. He had lived for centuries with one rule: trust no one. The Vampire Council had sent hunters, spies, and beautiful liars wearing innocence like perfume. Genevieve's calm pulse and steady eyes made him suspicious. So he prepared the oldest test he knew. In his bedroom, he lay on black silk sheets, hands folded over his chest like a dead king in a tomb. He slowed his heart to a crawl, cooled his skin, and forced his body into a trance so perfect any human would believe he was sleeping. But his mind stayed awake, sharp as a drawn blade, listening for a creak, a breath, the faint metal whisper of a weapon. Near midnight, the door opened with barely a sound. Footsteps approached, soft, careful, almost barefoot. Sebastian's senses tracked her like a predator tracking prey. He expected the lift of a pillow, the press of silver, the final betrayal. Instead, the mattress dipped, and she sat on the edge of the bed as if she didn't know she was sitting beside death. A quiet sound filled the dark. Not steel, not fear. A wet sniffle. Genevieve's breath shook once, twice, and then she whispered, so low it was almost a prayer, "You're freezing." A warm cloth touched his forehead, gentle and trembling. She brushed a strand of hair away from his brow with a tenderness that didn't belong in a room like this. Sebastian's instincts screamed that it was a trick, that kindness was bait. But her hands moved like someone who had cleaned wounds in war zones and still believed care mattered. Then she reached for his left hand, the one he kept hidden under gloves. Sebastian's scar and old bite that never healed right had haunted him for decades, not because of pain, but because it reminded him he was not invincible. Genevieve unrolled a small bandage and spread a pungent herbal salve over the jagged mark. "I see you rub it when you think no one's looking," she whispered, voice thick with emotion. "I know what it's like to carry pain quietly, because nobody cares enough to ask." And before Sebastian could make sense of it, she pressed a soft kiss to the scar like she was sealing a promise. His dead heart gave one violent thud, so loud in his own chest it felt like betrayal. He was the vampire king, feared across continents, and yet in that moment he was frozen not by a stake, but by a human girl treating him like he was worth saving. Genevieve tucked the duvet around his shoulders, humming a simple lullaby that didn't sound like magic. Only mercy, and she left as silently as she came, never taking a thing, never searching his secrets, never asking for a reward. Sebastian remained motionless long after the door closed, staring into darkness with eyes that didn't need light. He had tested her for cruelty and found compassion. And that discovery felt more dangerous than any assassin, because it made him wonder one impossible thing. What if the real threat wasn't her knife, but her kindness breaking the monster open from the inside? Asterisk morning inside Blackwood Hall felt like a funeral dressed as routine. Heavy curtains strangled the sunlight. Chandeliers glowed dim like dying stars. And the long dining table stretched between Sebastian Croft and Genevieve Miller like a battlefield. Neither wanted to step onto first. Sebastian sat at the head, gloved hands folded, posture perfect, expression carved from ice. But beneath the calm, his mind replayed the night again and again, the warmth of the cloth, the scent of herbal salve, the softness of a kiss placed on a scar no one was supposed to see. He had faced hunters, warlords, and centuries of betrayal without flinching. Yet a maid's quiet compassion had unsettled him more than all of it. Genevieve stood near the sideboard pouring coffee, movement steady, but eyes shadowed from lack of sleep. She had almost convinced herself the night hadn't happened, that maybe tending to him while he slept had been foolish, unprofessional, even dangerous. But she couldn't erase the sound she'd heard through the corridor, the low, broken whisper of a man calling out like a child lost in fire. She knew pain when she heard it. Nursing had taught her that monsters bled too, even if their wounds were hidden deeper. "Leave us," Sebastian ordered Reynolds, voice calm but absolute. The butler hesitated, glanced at Genevieve with concern, then obeyed. Silence thickened the room the moment the door shut. Sebastian rose in one fluid motion and crossed the distance between them faster than human sight could track. He stopped inches from her, towering, predatory, eyes glowing faint crimson. "Did you sleep well, Miss Miller?" he asked quietly. Genevieve swallowed, but held his gaze. "Yes, sir." The lie was thin. He reached out and seized her wrist, not violently, but firmly enough that she felt the iron strength beneath his restraint. "Do not lie to me," he murmured. "You were in my room." Her breath caught. For a second, fear flashed, but not fear for her life, fear of being misunderstood. "The West Wing is forbidden," he continued, voice lowering. Trespassing carries consequences. So tell me, who sent you? No one sent me, she said, struggling but not panicking. Then why were you there? His eyes searched her face like he wanted to peel truth from bone. Why did you touch me? Why did you treat a wound you should not know exists? Genevieve stopped resisting. The fear faded, replaced by that same aching sadness he'd seen before. Because you were crying out, she whispered. Sebastian froze. Impossible. You were, she insisted gently. Not screaming, begging, like someone reliving something they couldn't escape. I know that sound. His grip loosened without him realizing. You called a name, she added softly. Elena. The world tilted. Sebastian stepped back as if struck. Elena, his sister, burned alive centuries ago while he hid helpless in shadow. He had never spoken her name aloud since. Never allowed the memory air. You are food, he said suddenly, anger rising to mask vulnerability. You are nothing. You do not get to see me weak. Genevieve's chin lifted despite the tremor in her hands. I am a nurse, she corrected quietly. Or I was. I treated people no one else would, addicts, criminals, the abandoned. Pain is pain, Mr. Croft. It doesn't matter what body it lives in. Her words weren't defiant. They were compassionate, which somehow felt more invasive. He turned away, gripping the fireplace mantel. He should fire her, wipe her memory, remove the threat. Yet the salve on his scar still tingled faintly, and for the first time in decades, the ache was dulled. Get out, he whispered. She hesitated, wanting to say more, but the fury in his shoulders warned her not to push. She left silently, closing the door behind her. Days passed in uneasy distance. Sebastian avoided her presence, retreating to his crypt by day, watching security feeds by night. He saw her tending roses in the rain, repairing broken hinges, sharing her lunch with a stray cat near the servant's gate. She never pried, never stole, never asked questions. Her kindness wasn't strategic, it was instinctive. Then the phone rang in his study, one storm-heavy evening. Only one person used that secure line. Victor, Sebastian answered coldly. The rival vampire lord's voice purred through the receiver like poisoned silk. I hear you've taken in a new maid. Genevieve Miller. Sebastian's jaw tightened. My staff is none of your concern. Victor chuckled darkly. Did she tell you about her father? Sebastian's instincts sharpened instantly. She's an orphan. She is now, Victor said. But in 1990, during your purge of the Seattle Rogue Coven, you slaughtered a thrall named Robert Miller, a human servant addicted to vampire venom. He had a daughter hiding in the closet, 4 years old. She watched you kill him. Silence detonated inside Sebastian's mind. Memories rewound blood, fire, terrified human eyes peering from darkness. She didn't come to nurse you, Victor continued. She came to finish what her father couldn't. She's playing the long game. And when you trust her, snap, the line went dead. Betrayal surged through Sebastian like venom. Every moment, the calm pulse, the medical care, the whispered sympathy, twisted into manipulation in his thoughts. He had almost believed her kindness was real. Almost believed someone could see the man beneath the monster. Rage guiding him, he stormed to the greenhouse where she worked under moonlight, hands deep in soil. She looked up, startled but gentle. Mr. Croft. Drop the act, he cut in, voice lethal. I know who you are. Robert Miller's daughter, her face drained of color. How do you know that name? He slammed his hands beside her on the workbench, trapping her. I killed him. You saw me, so tell me, how long have you been planning revenge? Tears filled her eyes, but not hatred. I didn't come to kill you, she whispered. I came to thank you. The words shattered his accusation mid-her. My father was a monster, she continued, voice breaking. He hurt us, helped vampires hurt others. When you killed him, you saved me. She placed trembling hands over his unmoving heart. I've been looking for you for years, not for revenge. For closure. Sebastian stared at her, rage dissolving into stunned silence. In her eyes, he saw no deception, only painful truth and unexpected gratitude. For the first time in centuries, the Vampire King didn't feel feared. He felt seen. And that realization frightened him far more than her supposed revenge ever could. The confession in the greenhouse did not bring peace. It brought a heavier silence that followed. Sebastian coughed everywhere, like a shadow that refused to detach. After Genevieve revealed the truth about her father, the anger he had clung to as armor began to crack, exposing something far more dangerous underneath. Guilt. For centuries, he had justified every execution, every purge, every drop of blood spilled in the name of protecting humans from worse monsters. But now one of those humans stood before him, not broken by hatred, but shaped by gratitude. It unsettled the balance of power he understood. Monsters were meant to be feared, not forgiven. He withdrew after that night, not because he distrusted her, but because he no longer trusted himself around her. He found reasons to remain in his study, in the crypt, on the estate's outer grounds, anywhere that kept distance between them. Yet avoidance did nothing to quiet the awareness that tracked her movements through the mansion like a second pulse inside him. He watched security feeds more than necessary, observing the way she worked without complaint, how she treated even the lowest staff with respect, how she mended things others discarded: broken furniture, injured birds, neglected gardens. She moved through Blackwood Hall, not like a servant, but like someone trying to heal a place that had forgotten warmth. Genevieve, meanwhile, felt the shift but misread it. She assumed she had crossed a line by revealing her past, that perhaps reminding him of the night he killed her father had reopened wounds he wished buried. So she kept her distance too, communicating only when required, never stepping near the West Wing again. Yet despite the tension, she continued leaving small acts of care behind: fresh bandages in the medical cabinet, herbal salves stocked, gloves repaired where his old ones had torn. She never mentioned it, never asked if he noticed. 2 weeks passed in that fragile quiet until the outside world forced its way in. Sebastian was reviewing financial reports late into the night when the secure line rang again. He didn't need to check the caller ID. "Victor," he answered, voice already sharpened. The rival lord's laughter slithered through the receiver. "Still alive, old friend? I was beginning to think you'd grown sentimental, especially with your little nurse." Sebastian said nothing, but his silence invited more. "You think I called to threaten you?" Victor continued. "No, I called to warn you. She's more valuable than you realize." Sebastian's grip tightened on the desk. "Speak clearly." Victor sighed theatrically. Her father wasn't just a thrall. He carried a rare blood mutation, sanguis aeternus. Eternal blood. Enhances vampire strength, grants resistance to silver, even weakens sunlight's hold. That girl isn't just your maid. She's a prize. Cold fury ignited in Sebastian's chest. "You're lying." "Am I?" Victor replied smoothly. "Why do you think rogue covens kept her father alive so long? Why do you think I want the girl? Not dead, but harvested?" The line clicked dead again. Sebastian stood motionless, mind calculating implications with ruthless speed. If Victor knew about Genevieve, it meant surveillance, infiltration, imminent attack. And if what he said about her blood was true, she was no longer merely vulnerable. She was a target powerful enough to ignite war among vampire factions. He found her in the East Garden just before dawn, kneeling beside a rose bush, hands dirt-stained, humming softly to herself. The image struck him unexpectedly, something fragile, thriving in the territory of predators. "You shouldn't be outside alone," he said. She startled slightly, but recovered. "I like the quiet before sunrise." He studied her carefully, searching for signs of hidden power, hidden deceit, finding only sincerity. "Victor knows you're here," he said bluntly. Her brows furrowed. "Who's Victor?" "A rival who collects leverage," Sebastian replied. "And you?" "Maybe leverage." She stood slowly, sensing the shift in his tone. "You mean because of my father?" He hesitated before nodding. "There may be something in your blood others want." Fear flickered across her face, not for herself, but for what it meant. "I'm just human," she said softly. "Human doesn't mean harmless," he replied. "Especially in my world." Silence stretched, heavy with unspoken concern. Then she surprised him. "Then teach me how to survive it," she said. He blinked. "You're not leaving?" She shook her head. "I've run my whole life. I'm tired of being prey. Can you?" She hesitated before finishing. "You protected me before you even knew why." Something in his chest tightened at the trust in her voice. Before he could respond, the night shattered. Glass exploded from the mansion's front bay windows, the sound echoing across the grounds like gunfire. Sebastian's head snapped toward the house instantly, instincts igniting. "They're here," he muttered. Distant howls followed, too deep, too coordinated to be wolves. Lycanthrope mercenaries. Victor's signature brutality. Genevieve's breath hitched, but she didn't run. Sebastian grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the house at supernatural speed. "Stay behind me," he ordered. Shadows tore across the lawn as massive wolf forms leapt over iron fencing. They reached the side entrance just as claws splintered the main doors. Inside, chaos erupted, staff fleeing, alarms blaring. Reynolds appeared armed, face grim. "Perimeter breached, sir." Sebastian shoved Genevieve toward him. "Take her to the panic room, now." She resisted. "You're hurt your hand." "Go," he snarled, crimson eyes blazing. The kitchen doors exploded inward as the first lichen lunged. What followed was violence beyond human comprehension. Sebastian moved like living lightning breaking bones, tearing through attackers, but there were too many. Behind the beasts came Victor's vampire soldiers, silver weapons flashing. As Reynolds dragged Genevieve toward the cellar, she looked back once and saw Sebastian stagger under a silver strike, blood darkening his chest. Fear turned to resolve in her eyes. Because in that moment, the powerless girl understood something clearly. The king who protected everyone had no one protecting him, and she refused to let him fall alone. The panic room door sealed behind Genevieve with a heavy metallic thud that echoed like a final heartbeat cut off from the world above. For a moment she stood frozen, chest heaving, trying to slow her breathing while the surveillance monitors flickered to life across the steel walls. Grainy black and white feeds showed the mansion drowning in chaos, furniture overturned, walls clawed open, bodies scattered across marble floors. Somewhere in that storm of violence was Sebastian, and though fear gripped her bones, something stronger rooted her feet in place, the same instinct that had made her run toward patients everyone else abandoned. She scanned camera angles until she found him in the grand hall. He stood surrounded, suit torn, chest bleeding where silver had cut deep enough to slow his supernatural healing. Yet he still fought like a king refusing to kneel, wielding a shattered fireplace poker as if it were a royal blade. At his feet lay fallen enemies, wolves and vampires alike, but exhaustion was creeping into his posture. Then the attackers parted, and a new figure stepped forward. Victor. Even through the monitor, Genevieve felt the malice radiating from him. He wore a pristine white coat untouched by blood, smiling as if the carnage were entertainment. He struck Sebastian across the face with casual cruelty, sending the vampire king crashing against the staircase. Genevieve's hands clenched at the sight, not out of fear, but anger. The powerful always humiliated the powerful when they fell. She'd seen that hierarchy her entire life. Victor pressed a boot against Sebastian's chest, pinning him. His lips moved taunting, bargaining, threatening. Genevieve didn't need to hear the words to understand the intent. He wasn't here just to kill. He wanted to break him first. Her gaze darted around the panic room, searching for anything useful: food rations, water kits, medical supplies. And then her eyes landed on the chemical cabinet. Years of nursing training and emergency response protocols lit up in her memory. Industrial ammonia, cleaning bleach. Mixed improperly, they produced chloramine gas, highly toxic, corrosive to lungs, overwhelming even enhanced senses. Her heart pounded. "Stay here," she whispered to herself, gripping the counter. "You're safe. Don't be foolish." But safety had never saved anyone she loved before. She remembered Sebastian placing himself between her and the attackers without hesitation. Remembered the pain in his eyes when he thought she might betray him. Remembered the warmth of trust forming between predator and prey. Decision replaced fear. She grabbed the chemical containers, found a gas mask stored in the emergency kit, and keyed open the panic room door. The hallway beyond smelled of smoke and blood. She moved quickly, mixing the liquids into 2 metal buckets, hands trembling but precise. Upstairs, Victor raised a polished hawthorn steak, preparing to finish what his mercenaries had begun. Sebastian's vision blurred as silver poisoning slowed his body to near paralysis. He could barely lift his head, yet one thought burned through the haze: not fear of death, but fear Victor would find Genevieve. Then her voice rang from the balcony above. "Hey!" Both vampires looked up. Genevieve stood at the railing, gas mask covering her face, buckets in hand. For a split second, even Victor looked amused. "The little nurse came to watch?" He mocked. "I came to clean house," she replied. She hurled the buckets down. The liquids collided on the marble floor and erupted into a thick yellow-green cloud that spread instantly through the hall. Chloramine fumes filled the air, searing vampire lungs, blinding heightened vision. Mercenaries staggered back choking, howling in agony. Even Victor recoiled, covering his mouth as the gas burned his senses. Through the chaos, Genevieve ran not away, but toward Sebastian. She reached him, wrapping his arm over her shoulders despite his weight. "Up," she urged. "You have to move." His eyes widened faintly in disbelief. She had just weaponized chemistry against apex predators without hesitation. He forced his legs to obey, leaning heavily on her as they stumbled through side corridors, escaping the gas cloud. They burst into the underground garage where luxury cars gleamed untouched by battle. Sebastian fumbled for keys, strength fading. Genevieve snatched them, shoved him into the passenger seat of a sleek Aston Martin, and started the engine. "Wait," he rasped. Reynolds. She checked the mirrors, saw smoke devouring the mansion. No sign of the loyal butler. Her voice cracked, but stayed firm. He stayed behind, to buy us time. Pain flashed through Sebastian's eyes, but he nodded once. "Then his sacrifice won't be wasted. Drive." She slammed the accelerator. The car tore through the garage doors, racing down the rain-slicked driveway as Blackwood Hall burned behind them in chemical fog and moonlight. For 20 minutes they drove in silence into the depths of the forest until Genevieve finally pulled off the road, engine dying as reality caught up. Sebastian slumped, skin gray, veins darkening, the silver poisoning spreading fast. "You're dying," she whispered. "I've been dead for centuries," he murmured weakly. "Not tonight," she said, already tearing fabric for bandages. Inside the dim car, she worked frantically, pulling silver fragments from his chest wound with trembling precision, ignoring the way his blood stained her hands. He never screamed, but the strain in his jaw told her the agony was beyond human measure. When she finished, she heated a dagger and cauterized the wound, the smell of burning flesh filling the air. He collapsed unconscious. Minutes later, as rain hammered the roof, she felt cold fingers brush her hair. His wound had sealed, leaving only a fresh scar. He studied her with a depth that made the small space feel electric. "You stayed," he whispered. She met his gaze, exhausted but unwavering. "I told you. I don't run anymore." And in that quiet forest, predator and human sat side by side, not as master and servant, but as survivors bound by trust forged in fire. The forest around them felt older than memory itself, towering trees swallowing the road, rain falling in slow, relentless sheets that turned the world into shadow and silver. The Aston Martin sat hidden beneath the canopy, engine silent, headlights off, as if even the machine understood they were being hunted. Inside the car, the air was thick with the scent of blood, antiseptic herbs, and something unspoken that neither of them dared name yet. Genevieve had finished treating Sebastian's wounds, her hands still trembling slightly from adrenaline and exhaustion, but her eyes remained steady on him, not fearful, not submissive, just quietly resolute. Sebastian studied her the way he once studied battlefields, analyzing strengths, weaknesses, unknown variables. But she didn't behave like prey. She had faced down a rival vampire lord, weaponized chemistry against supernatural killers, and saved a creature the world called a monster without hesitation. It forced him to reconsider everything he believed about power. "You should have left me," he said quietly. "You had the chance. No one would blame you for running." She shook her head, rainwater still clinging to loose strands of her hair. "Running is what powerless people do when they believe no one will stand for them. You stood for me." Before I even asked, her voice softened. "Kindness deserves loyalty, even if it comes from a vampire king." The words struck deeper than any blade because they carried no flattery, only truth. He leaned back against the seat, strength slowly returning as his body neutralized the remaining silver toxin. Silence settled again until he spoke, voice lower, more guarded. "Victor wasn't just after me tonight." Genevieve frowned. "I figured." He turned his head slightly to look at her. "Your father carried something rare in his bloodline. A mutation vampires call sanguis aeternus, eternal blood. It enhances our kind, makes us resistant to silver, even weakens sunlight's burn." She stared at him, stunned. "You're saying my blood is valuable to them?" "Not valuable," he corrected grimly. "Weaponized." The realization settled heavy in her chest. "So Victor wants to capture me, not kill me." Sebastian nodded. "Harvest you. Use you to become stronger than any vampire alive." She exhaled slowly, absorbing the danger not with panic, but with practical clarity. "Then we don't let him." The simplicity of her response surprised him. Most humans broke under far smaller revelations. She, however, seemed to grow steadier the higher the stakes climbed. Before he could respond, his heightened hearing caught movement outside, the faint snap of branches, distant but deliberate. His eyes sharpened instantly. "They tracked us faster than expected." Genevieve's pulse quickened, but she didn't freeze. "How many?" "Enough," he replied, opening the glove compartment and retrieving a hidden firearm loaded with silver-tipped rounds, ineffective for killing high-tier vampires, but lethal to their mercenaries. Headlights flickered through the trees as black vehicles approached from the logging trail entrance. Shadows moved between trunks wolves again, accompanied by armed human thralls. Victor wasn't waiting for recovery this time. "Stay inside," Sebastian ordered, opening the car door despite his injuries. Genevieve grabbed his arm. "You're still healing." He met her gaze, and something softer flickered beneath the predator's surface. "And you're still human, which is exactly why you stay." He stepped into the rain just as the first attackers emerged from the darkness. The fight that followed was brutal, but shorter than the mansion assault. Fueled by rage and the protective instinct he no longer denied, Sebastian tore through the mercenaries with lethal precision. Wolves fell beneath his strength. Thralls scattered under gunfire. But the numbers kept pressing, trying to surround him. Inside the car, Genevieve watched through rain-blurred glass, heart pounding. She saw him falter, once just slightly, as the earlier wounds slowed his reflexes. That was enough. She refused to remain passive. Spotting emergency flares in the backseat kit, she grabbed them, ignited one, and burst from the vehicle despite his orders. The sudden crimson light disoriented the wolves, sensitive eyes recoiling from the brightness. She hurled another flare into the brush, igniting dry undergrowth despite the rain, creating a wall of fire and smoke that disrupted the attackers' formation. Sebastian used the opening instantly, finishing the remaining mercenaries in a blur of motion. When silence returned, broken only by rain hissing against smoldering earth, he turned toward her, anger and fear colliding in his expression. "I told you to stay inside." She didn't flinch. "And I told you I don't run anymore." The flare's dying glow painted her face in red light, making her look less like prey and more like a warrior who simply lacked fangs. He approached slowly, rain sliding down his face like melted ice. "You risked your life. So did you," she replied. "Difference is, you think it's your duty. I think it's my choice." That answer silenced his reprimand before it fully formed. For a long moment they stood there, storm raging around them, neither speaking. Then he removed his glove, the same hand she had bandaged nights ago, and extended it toward her. Hesitantly, she placed her hand in his. His skin was cold, but his grip was careful, almost reverent. "You are no longer my maid," he said quietly. "From this moment, you stand under my protection as my equal." Her breath caught slightly at the weight of that declaration. Not romantic, not yet, but deeply binding. Because in vampire law, such protection wasn't temporary. It was the first unspoken step toward claiming someone as part of a king's eternal world. The rain had not stopped by the time dawn threatened the horizon, but the forest felt different, now quieter, as if even nature sensed the shift that had taken place between predator and human. After the ambush, Sebastian drove deeper into territory only ancient vampires knew existed, an abandoned monastery carved into the mountainside, shielded by centuries-old wards that masked supernatural presence. It was not a palace like Blackwood Hall, but a sanctuary built for war, refuge, and truth. Genevieve followed him through the stone corridors without fear, though exhaustion weighed on her steps. She had crossed from servant to hunted, from invisible to invaluable, and there was no returning to the life she once knew. Inside the main chamber, moonlight filtered through shattered stained glass, painting the walls in fractured colors. Sebastian stopped near the altar, his posture heavy with thought. "You should rest," he said without turning. The last 24 hours would break most humans. Genevieve leaned against a pillar, but shook her head. "Rest can wait. Answers can't." He glanced at her then, something like reluctant respect flickering in his eyes. She had endured terror, violence, revelation, and still stood asking questions instead of hiding from them. He exhaled slowly. "Victor won't stop. You are too valuable to him alive, too symbolic to me dead." She frowned slightly. "Symbolic?" He stepped closer, voice quieter now. "For centuries, vampire royalty ruled through fear alone. Humans were resources, never allies. But you—" He paused, searching for words he wasn't used to speaking. "You risked yourself for a creature you were raised to fear. That changes power dynamics more than war ever could." She absorbed that, then asked a question lingering beneath everything. "So what happens now?" He studied her carefully before answering. "Now you choose." Her brows lifted. "Choose what?" "Whether you return to a human life I can finance and protect from a distance, or remain beside me, knowing my enemies become yours, my world becomes yours, and danger will never truly leave." The gravity of the choice settled heavily, but Genevieve didn't hesitate long. "I've spent my whole life surviving alone," she said softly. "For the first time, I don't feel alone." She met his gaze directly. "I stay." Something ancient shifted behind Sebastian's eyes. Not hunger, not possession, but recognition. Slow-burn respect deepened into something warmer, more protective, more personal. He stepped closer until only inches separated them. "Then you must understand what that means." His voice lowered. Victor will come again. Not with mercenaries, but with war. As if summoned by prophecy, the monastery wards suddenly flared crimson. Sebastian's head snapped toward the entrance. He's early. Outside, the mountainside trembled as Victor and his elite guard approached, cloaked in supernatural force, strong enough to shake ancient defenses. Genevieve's pulse raced, but she didn't retreat. Instead, she moved to Sebastian's side, standing shoulder to shoulder. The battle that followed was not like the others. It was king against king, speed beyond sight, power cracking stone, centuries of rivalry erupting into violence. Victor fought with enhanced strength, fueled by stolen blood experiments. Sebastian fought with something Victor lacked: purpose. Every strike he threw carried not just survival instinct, but the drive to protect someone standing behind him who refused to hide. At one critical moment, Victor broke through his guard, driving a silver spear toward Sebastian's heart. Genevieve reacted before thought, grabbing a fallen blade and deflecting the strike just enough for Sebastian to counter. The distraction allowed him to disarm Victor and drive him to his knees beneath the shattered altar. Victor laughed even in defeat. "You fight like this? For a human?" Sebastian's eyes glowed not with rage, but certainty. "No, I fight like this. For someone who saw a monster and chose kindness anyway." With one final decisive strike, he ended the threat permanently. Silence fell over the ruined chamber. Sebastian turned slowly to Genevieve, who stood breathing hard but unbroken. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then he removed his crown's signet ring, a symbol worn by vampire royalty for centuries, and placed it gently in her palm. "This is not ownership," he said quietly. "It is recognition. You walked into darkness and chose compassion. You stood in war and chose courage. You healed a king who had forgotten how to feel human." Her eyes shimmered, but she didn't look away. Slowly, he lifted her hand and pressed it over his heart. The same place she had once touched in the greenhouse, the same place she had chosen to protect instead of destroy. "From this night forward," he continued, voice steady but softer than ever before, "you are not my servant, not my guest, but the one person this immortal world cannot afford to lose." Outside, the storm finally broke, moonlight pouring through shattered glass, as if the night itself approved of the union not rushed romance, but a bond forged through trust, sacrifice, and earned respect. Because in the end, the greatest power wasn't immortality. It was kindness strong enough to thaw even a vampire king's frozen heart.